45 people. So this webinar, folks, welcome all. It's about Agile for hardware, and I know the subtitle says it all. It's a pre-event to our Agile for hardware event in Munich, the 20th of September. I'm really looking forward to that because this is a bit more of a teaser. We like to kind of give you some insights, some ideas, some things to linger on into the next weeks before your holidays. Because I've been the last years quite passionate about Agile and hardware and trying to combine it. And whenever you say something like that, people say, on the one hand, people say, oh, it's impossible, and you have long lead times and all these kinds of things. And on the other side, there's people who say, yeah, it's not different from Agile in the first place, so why do you have to be something specific? So this has become my passion. I've worked with quite some companies in the hardware space, among which are Philips, ASML, Mercedes. I've done multiple things in NXP, different companies, chip companies, Sara Lee coffee machines. I've seen quite some different things. Chocolate milk factory machines. I've seen quite some crazy things, and as such, I think we've learned, the past years specifically, that Agile for hardware becomes more of a thing. So I'll start off with the event that this is a pre-event for, to kind of give you a little bit of an insight in what we're about to do. This is so the 20th of September, we're hosting at BMW World. So thank you BMW for honoring us with your sponsorship on this, providing the location. It's an Agile hardware event, and I think this is going to be really cool. We'll have some great speakers, but we also have some really good workshops. I'm going to be in one where we are going to use some hands-on things to get you to experience the real feel of Agile for hardware in a very simple and comprehensible manner. Again, 20th of September. I'll come back to this at the end, but hey, hi from Munich. I will come back to this, of course, at the end of the webinar to kind of repeat this message, because that's making you remember is a good thing. Maybe a little bit about me. So very quickly, I'm Eelco. I'm an engineer. So this is my E, and you can see a picture of me being a very young engineer already. I added systemic coaching to this, so going from the back to the front. And systemic coaching has led me to help teams in all kinds of ways. Agile has been with me for a long time, since 1996. I think I started as an Agilist in some Scrum team. I didn't know it was Agile yet, but that's Agile. And then the latest addition to my crafts and skills has been the biology science of biology, neuroscience, to kind of understand people and engineering. Change in an organization means you need to work with people to kind of also put a bit more systemic approach to that. So enough about me. I think we're going to go a lot into the engineering side of things. So engineering is going to be, of course, what we will be talking about mostly. We have some Agile in it, but the biology and systemic coaching thing will not be part of this webinar. There's different ones for that. The recording for this will be available. I'm not sure where, so that will be something we need to answer still. And for the rest, I will just move on, because this is recorded and the recording will become available. So I need to not hiccup and cough and make weird noises because that will all be on recording. So talking about Agile, this is the thing that that struck me the most in trying to explain why this is such a big deal. Because we have had successful development of products for years and years and years, and this world is way more advanced than the software industry could even dream to currently. Because the software industry is young. It's 20, 25, 30 years old, maybe something. Oh, it's a bit more, like 40 years now. I'm getting old myself. But the concept of hardware development is that your choices mean risk, and you need to be efficient with the stuff that you have. So the Darth Vader approach basically to most developments is that we look at risk and efficiency most. This is our first kind of focus area if you look at designing products. So the example of the zero pot design of the Mercedes W13 Formula One car is one of those examples. They kind of found that the model that they would provide with the zero side pods, the one that is shown on the let me put my pointer, my laser pointer here. The one on the side here is actually the one that they chose because it had better aerodynamic features. The thing was that it didn't work in real life. So their testing was in a simulator, and in real life it didn't work. Now, that can happen. That's not the problem. The real problem here is they get stuck with this design because they were trying to be overly efficient on the design and making it in one piece. Now that's a choice that kind of haunted them for 1 or 2 seasons almost, because they said, well, now we can't really change anything to this anymore. If you look at risk and efficiency management and thinking about that first, the most of the environments that you see is that there needs to be a very clear picture on what is really important to reduce risk. And the answer, of course, is not by using the Darth Vader approach, which is, well, demonstrating always to lose in the long end. So in the long run, you will lose. But in this case, the one little thing that changes everything is risk reduction by cost of change. So if you start to think about the risk reduction in terms of the cost of change and how to reduce that, then you start to kind of say, hey, now I can actually make changes. You could still go for a zero pot design that's completely wrong. But if you think about change constantly and the amount of change you can make at a relatively low cost, that will change everything. Now, in a workshop, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser of this, we did actually some interesting exercises with architects, hardware architects, and we gave them some exercises, and we used a really simple model. And although it sounds really simple, it was sometimes revelations for them. And these are really clever people. So we did this workshop in which we said, well, you have a system, and the system is here in the middle, and the system basically says drop a ball and it needs to go through this system. That's a very simple thing, okay? So we have a top interface and a bottom interface that is defined, which means that you can drop your ball here and it would just go through, and it would kind of end at the bottom where it goes through and moves into wherever. Now, because the top interface and the bottom interface are fitting to each other, because that's the whole idea, you could stack these things up. And now you can start building a system and making changes rapidly by moving the things around, because the interface is consistent and will always work. So this is something that many you get it. If you look at this, you're like, okay, I understand it. And some people may even know that I like to create like tracks with balls. So they say, yeah, it makes sense that this guy invented this. But this idea goes further than you think, because we gave people certain amounts of time to build something, and they started to learn, of course, how this works. And then we started adding requirements. And then you could see that the ones who have figured out how to quickly kind of reduce the cost of change by building more of these interfaces into their system are easier in reconfiguring the system than the ones that just listen to I need to have a top and a bottom interface. So the step towards a more aggressive approach, in which you say, oh, I'm going to use this internally as well, kind of would lead me to say, this won't happen. Because if the interfaces here on the side pods would have been such that you could have replaced the aerodynamic system in parts, they would have had less trouble making the changes. I still have a firm belief that Alpine will actually grow back into the top form of the teams, because they presumably, allegedly, have the most adaptive system of interfaces. So they don't have to, they have not one but multiple. So the idea here is, of course, to say, well, the normal kind of approach is that you say, look, I want to design it and then build it. you're trying to impersonate Darth Vader there. I'm not getting a seizure or something. And I want my Death Star. It's a complex machine. I have a master plan. I'm creating these things, and this is what I want. So the typical thing to do here is to use for such a complex machinery. Even if you would do this in Lego, it's still a complex machinery. It's not as complex as the real one. I've never been at a real one, by the way, but just as a mind setter. This is what we typically use. We use the V model for reducing complexity of high-tech and compliance. Now, why do we have this really? So the reason is that we need to manage complexity and high-tech and compliance and process and designs and everything, which may all be true, it's fine. And you can actually use this V model quite well. But why are we really using it? We're really using it because risks are high, integration is difficult, and cost of change is high. So if that becomes the truth, then if you take these things as for granted, like, well, cost of change is high, just a fact, integration is difficult, risks are high, then the automatic consequence almost is that you need to start thinking about a V model. Because then it means you need to kind of make risks lower by thinking more about the design up front and all these kinds of things. So what happens is that you start to get yourself stuck into this mindset that says, cost of change is high, so we can't. Ordering a new part takes 12 months. That's cost of change. That's 12 months waiting time. Lead times are change as well, cost of change, because you wait. It's an expensive model. So this whole idea is built, so the way that hardware is designed and built, everything, is based on these three basics, like the foundations. The foundations of hardware development is that the risks are high, integration is difficult, and cost of change is high. So we don't want change. We want to do as little integration as possible, because we need to kind of have components that kind of fit together, and risks are high. So we need to manage risk by focusing on the risk area. So you see most approaches in hardware development are risk-based rather than value-based, which kind of made me realize a point. I've been working a lot in these areas, and like, well, first of all, the V model is not stupid. It's probably a very clever system to kind of decompose a system into subsystems and components and all that. That makes sense. So don't throw it away. That would be crazy. And I've seen some interesting examples of how to make this work if you start to really look into it. In ASML, for example, they're using what they call concurrent engineering. Wonderful idea where they say, well, yes, we have a V, but we're not going to use it in the strict form of the V, saying we have to have like, phase gates, and you cannot pass until you have checked everything, because that would be too slow. That's the way NASA does it. We have the same type of model because we have the same type of complexity, but fundamentally, we want to move on and learn in real life. Learn as fast as we can in actual realization. So realization gives us feedback on multiple levels on the actual things that we do. So people are saying, yeah, we need to bring Agile to this company. That there's a lot of agility often built into systems, and people have learned. What Agile wants to bring is actually something, and I thought about this, and I hate acronyms, but I thought, like, well, if I would say something about this, it would probably be that Agile is, especially in these hardware environments, is actually not Agile but Atile, because I couldn't come up with an acronym that would use the G in that particular point. So I said, well, it's then I'm going to kind of make a statement here that Agile for hardware should be more about Atile, and which is not a word. It's just a way to kind of say, well, aggressive testing. I keep coming back to that. If I look at successful and quick hardware development, whether it's Agile or not, they all take a really aggressive approach in testing and incremental learning. Their environment is built on that. It's really about everything is about that. Any innovation in hardware development that makes things faster is all about aggressive testing. And there's quite some funny examples, of course. So if you look at the Yoda approach, the first thing that people have learned is learn fast. Well, digital build you must, right? This is the thing, the digital twin model. We see this everywhere, but this is, if you look at this in the aggressive testing mode in your head, you start to say, I need to build a model that represents my real life better and better and better and better and better and better and better. And this is where I think we can learn a lot from Formula One again. Because if you look at the models that these guys have built, they can do race simulations that are so close to reality that the data that they gather from the virtual space, the information, can actually go into the physical space and translates pretty well. And then of course they bring the real life data, what actually happens, they bring that back to the digital twin model to say, well, our model sucks, so we need to improve it. So in the past years, racing cars have become so low to the ground that they start to kind of suck so much air, and the downforce becomes so much that they start to kind of hit the ground at certain points. And when they hit the ground, the downforce is gone, so they kind of bounce back up. And they start bouncing like this. This is an effect that's called porpoising, and it's an effect that's caused by really aggressive kind of downforce strategies. And the models didn't have porpoising. They didn't have this effect. They would never have a system in which the car would actually get to the ground and they would realize no airstream under the car anymore, which means the car bounces back up. So this bouncing effect was not modeled. Well, that has been quite some work in the last years in building these simulators to kind of start modeling that, because they want to be able to do everything. They are going to use everything for tire wear and speed and corner speed and aerodynamics, so digital wind tunnels and all these kinds of things. So the digital twin model should be used far more aggressive in any company that I've seen. I think that the only things where I wouldn't say something like that is probably the Formula One teams and how they're doing, because I think going that extreme and taking your learnings as fast as possible makes you, well, go away from this a little bit more, because then the cost of change becomes so much lower, because your model starts to predict your actual real life results easier. So this is an example of how that could work. Well, okay. Now we say, okay, so yes, so your tip is to make more digital. Yes, to be able to aggressively test and test as fast and as often as and as aggressive as possible. You need to do this. You need to start building a digital capability for your hardware product, regardless what your product is about. If your product is a coffee machine, you can build a digital twin. There's not many examples like that, because we're not doing this aggressive testing because we think it's too expensive. But the cost of change is everything that you need to look at if you're looking at risk reduction and long-term development. People don't realize that if you start to build the capability of building digital twins, you start to build a digital framework for building digital twins for more of your products. So this is for anything. So I get a question here. So my engineers would challenge that this is great for mechanical, but it won't work for PCBAs. Any suggestions for this example? I think you have the same thing. You could build a digital twin for a PCBA. I'm not sure if NXP is doing it, but I know that Intel has done some tests with that. Modeling how PCBAs kind of respond to things, inputs, outputs, and everything. You can model that, and if you can model it, you can say what are the big things that we always have difficulties with. What is it power? Is it robustness? Is it regulating the power in it? So this is all questions, and these questions you can actually use to build a digital twin. And this answers the second question that is in there as well. Is a complete digital twin necessary? Can it be submodules? If you say it's going to be difficult or expensive to build a full digital twin, start with a submodule indeed where you have the most pain. Can you have two modules and their interaction kind of simulated by building something in the middle? Yes. So that will be my first answers to these things. If I look at aggressive testing, aggressive testing is our goal, and then a digital twin is really a big step towards it. Well, there's also a question why you're saying only a few companies use digital twins. It's biased. But currently my own experience in like the 150 or 200 companies that I've seen in my space, I rarely see them actively using digital twins for their hardware development across the board. So this is something that is not really looked into to say I want to do aggressive testing, and for that I'm going to use this. So this is my own data point from our trainings and our encounters in our workshops and everything that we do, that I just don't see it coming back as often as I would like. Maybe it's different in your space, I don't know. So this is something that people say, okay, great, cool, now what? Well, it's a good question, because this is not all. Digital, I get it, but still, right? It's still a big ask to kind of build these complex machines or PCBAs or all kinds of hardware developments are all requesting more difficulty. And slicing is something that has had, since the last 10 years or something, has had a pretty strong promise, at least. And as such, I've been working on this, and everybody loves it. Whenever you talk about slicing, you do an exercise or you do something, and people say, "Oh yeah, this is really nice," and it fits with Agile, it fits with Lean, it makes sense, and it's incremental, and yes, yes, yes. But then getting it right is quite hard, because you're starting to hit the breakdown of your systems as you're used to. You're starting to touch the V model. You start to hit the core of your development when you start to think about a different way to slice your product. Now, there's examples, of course, but I'll give you first a picture to kind of make you think, because that's the reason why slicing is so important. And that's, if you look at functional decomposition, this is what happens often, and it's an exaggerated picture and it's a simplified picture, and you can argue with this all you want. But fundamentally, if you see what people do when they start to go into these breakdowns and functional breakdowns and functional decompositions, is they say, well, this is what we want. They do a functional breakdown and they give these quality components. And what you will see happening is that some of them work just as expected, some of them not done, some of them too good to be true, and it starts to potentially have misaligned. Especially in more complex products, you see that the amount of people that need to work on this is going to be too big to kind of really align on that. And then change requests don't make it because, we're busy, and that's for the second version. This is no longer possible. Exaggerated a little bit, but this is type of the process that we see. Why we need it is lost in the process, and everybody starts to build according to specification. And this is another thing. If you look at hardware development, your interfaces are not as fluid as software interfaces. So hardware interfaces mean that people tend to go toward really specifying the whole solution. And I've said this in a couple of environments that I work with. Like, look, better requirements don't mean that you need to move into the specification space. Better requirements means that you need to be more explicit about why you need something. What is the goal of what you want to have? What is the goal of this submodule? What does it do? What is its responsibility in the total system? Rather than specifying how it should work. The specification is something that you need to develop and integrate in a more incremental manner. The requirements are something that kind of stay a little bit more stable because you have a stable desire of what you need. And that may change, but it's less flexible than what you learn in real life. So MVP thinking and slicing kind of says, well, what is the first bites that we would like to take? We have a minimum viable function. We feedback what we miss. And this means that we can aggressively test. The assumption here is that we can do it faster and cheaper this way than another way. Now people argue with this and say, yeah, but what happens if this thing that we just left out is going to be the most difficult one? Well, that's always going to be a problem. If things hit you, risks hit you, you need to respond to it, which is why digital twins, model-based systems engineering, these kinds of things are so important. So digital twins, model-based systems engineering help you to kind of reduce the cost of a risk hitting you. incremental development leads you to kind of learn the biggest lessons fastest and get you some feedback as soon as possible, which reduces the risk in total. But the risk is still there that you make a decision and you do something and it's the bad decision. The sidepod thing is still going to potentially happen because your model sucks. There's a new physical requirement. Things happen. The thing is that if you design next to this slicing for adaptability, then the whole thing starts to kind of fall together and be put into place. So the whole idea of adaptability is probably something that you need to be more aggressive on. If I look at this in a more picture place, if I look at Agile for hardware architecting, there's typically people who are more on the MVP product owner side. I want to have my backwards compatibility, my quality, my commonality, adaptability, and future proofness. This is what I want. And then there's engineers that function based on the functional decomposition, the technical risk, and covering performance, cost of goods, and other fundamentals. And then there's the business owner side, which basically says, well, I have some value to gain from this. I want something, and I want you to kind of, I'm going to explain the impact that I want to make in my roadmap. So my roadmap has a plan for delivering certain values and certain things to the market. Now, then there's of course one person in this typical, or one role, you could say, that really understands this facilitation of mapping this thing and bringing this together. I've done this exercise so many times, and every time there's a breakthrough, every time it's like, oh, this is so simple. And the digital twin helps, of course, because you can say, well, what is the digital walking skeleton? You could even make it thinner. You could say, well, could we build a little model that tests this assumption with a number of requirements that we have? So that makes it even cheaper and even more beautiful to do. Giving some ideas on this MVP thinking and these functions, the one assumption that I take is that architects need to focus on this cost of change thing. And the best way to think about cost of change from an architectural point of view, from a product point of view, whether it's a PCBA or anything else, is that your adaptability is your number one focus in terms of architectural value that you deliver. As an architect, your biggest contribution is to make things adaptable, because that means that the development process is able to move faster. There's examples of this in if you take Tesla is a wonderful example where they kind of said, well, we have two systems and they need to be interconnected, and the interconnected thing is always going to lead to each other by the use of an adapter in between. So that means that literally adapter means that you are more adaptable, because the two things don't plug together directly, which means that if I change my interface on one side, I have the other side to change, and then the other team is hurt. No, I have an adapter in the middle, which means that I can horse around with the interface and do whatever I want, basically change from a lighting to a USB-C connector with anything I want, because the adapter will make it possible for me to say, well, I don't care, the other side is still the same, so the other team is not hurt. So it creates this autonomy for your modules to kind of scale together and build their own kind of thing and be responsible to a certain moment. So that only means when there's an interface change where you say, I need to really give you some more, needs to get bigger on my side, then you may have to change the adapter. And the interesting thought here is that people say, yeah, but I've discussed this in many architectural environments, that it's expensive. But then you need to build an extra adapter, and that's expensive. Well, the thing is that, if you look at Tesla's development, they do these kinds of things, and then they say, well, once we get it, then we remove that waste. Don't remove that waste too early, because then you're stuck. But if you remove that waste later, so first make sure that it just it's adaptable. Once you figure it out and say, okay, this is kind of stable now, this area, these submodules, these things are stable, now you can say now efficiency. So it's about effectiveness and autonomy and adaptability first. Think adaptability first, And then in the course of time and updates and upgrades, you can say, okay, now we figured it out, now we can improve it. And there's the wonderful example, of course, of the back end of the chassis of the Model 3 of Tesla is, I think, one piece. It's like one piece of steel. They figured it out. But they didn't start like that. They started looking at how to make these things, and then they learned and learned and learned, and kept it like modular and adaptable. And then they said, well, I think we figured it out. So now we can remove all these adapters and make it really cheap. And now we can make it in one piece, because this is not going to change anymore. So it's again this agile or lean principle: defer commitment at the latest responsible moment by moving adapters into your interfaces. So making loose coupling basically of your architecture, loose coupling with single responsibility units. I think that's the key thing here. If you have that, then you can start moving forward faster and learn more aggressively and test more aggressively for your next versions. Once you're there and you've learned enough, you say, well, now we can take the risk of removing that adaptability and making this one piece, because this is not an area in which we want to improve much more or innovate much more. It's not going to be extreme, it's going to be small changes. So all in all, maybe to give you a little bit of an idea still, I'm going to kind of cut this. So you need to be aggressive in 5 areas, and this is something, because testing aggressive and slicing aggressively, people say yeah that makes sense, and then how do you do it? So I have a few examples here. The first one is slicing the business case, and the top picture here you can see here this drone. This is from a company called Zipline, and they said, well, we have an idea that we could send drones to deliver something. So if the drone could deliver something, that would be really cool, right? But it needs to be precise and silent and everything. So, but we have a vision that we could deliver packages to your doorstep. So Amazon will be an interesting party for us. Well, their first version, their first MVP of a drone that would deliver something consistently wasn't up for that. They didn't have the money or the technology to make this precise and everything. So basically they said, look, you know what we're going to do? We're going to slice the business case. Where doesn't it really matter if we deliver something around your area of desire? So if we're 100 meters off or 200 meters off, we're still okay. People are still happy. And they found that blood delivery in Rwanda was a perfect opening business for their idea. So their business case, their first business case, was to deliver blood to hospitals in rural Rwanda, because if you have to drive with your truck with blood 6 hours on the road towards a hospital to save a life, then that's 6 hours. And this drone could do it in 45 minutes. So even if the drone fails, crashes, and the blood is lost, then you could still say, I can send another one. It's of course painful, but it's still faster still than the 6 hours. So you could save lives. And on top of that, if you drop it near the hospital and somebody needs to run out and search in the bushes for a little bit to find your delivery, that's perfectly okay, because you've just saved 4 hours. So that business case was the main kind of target for their kind of first MVP. They said, well, we need to test this. Now they're starting to do this. They're starting to shoot these drones into the air and bring them to hospitals, and they start to become successful. So successful means we're learning, we're aggressively testing. We want to get to 99% up. So if you look at their business now, they're going into a space where they are flying way higher, really silent. They're taking models from different animals to kind of figure out how to fly silently. And now they could actually drop a package in the precision of your doorstep. So it's building a business case. Now, slicing the features, this is something that if you look at Red Bull Racing or any Formula One car, they do this. They basically say, look, we have a set of features, we tested, we have ideas, and now we need to kind of grow our car through the season, improving and making small features, because we have limited budget for that period, and we need to optimize it. So we're going to slice feature by feature. This is feature slicing. This is the most easy one, because you can just say, well, how about we do this feature now and we build this feature then. Features and slicing features relies heavily on your ability to create adaptability, to modularize your system. So modular design with hopefully most components to be having a single responsibility is kind of how a system works together really well. And then you could build your features more gradually. The risk there is that you start introducing many features. So here again, a short cycle with little change is far better than big cycles with lots of change. Because if you have a big cycle with lots of change, you have more uncertainty about what these changes do, because your model is only your model. And as you can see right now in Formula One in this season, Red Bull has taken a pretty big step forward. And now they need to learn quickly and bring small updates. Every 2 weeks they bring updates to learn how to deal with this. So that's it. Slicing the risks, it's a little bit the same, because by bringing small updates, you kind of can manage the risk better, because if it's not working, you can revert back easier because you know what it's about. You know why this is happening. So this is something that you could, features and risks, it's very close. I would always opt to say, well, can we learn something faster? So aggressive testing means it's either features or risk, I don't care. It's just learning. Okay, so slicing the use case, that's a bit SpaceX landing accuracy. They have, of course, the SpaceX orbital booster. They wanted to get into production as fast as possible, and the whole idea, and this is, you could argue the cost of change here, but they basically said the best way to figure out how to do this is to launch, because then we'll see how it doesn't land. So the learning is in the failing. So they basically said, let's shoot a rocket, see how it explodes or crashes on its way back. And then from there, we start to kind of learn things about this use case and slicing that use case into small pieces of, okay, or what if we can just make sure that it crashes like this rather than just crashes any random way? Can we make it crash bottom down? Can we cause that crash to be more consistent? Because then we learn a lot. So this is the way that you can slice the use case even. This is a wonderful example with which SpaceX has kind of defied all expectations. I think NASA said something like, well, this would take you 35 years. They did it in 5 to 6 years. They were having a really high landing accuracy with 99 point something successful landings of orbital boosters, which is an amazing thing. On top of that, of course, be digital where you can to scale and to stay agile. There's a question I'm going to look at. The make and buy ratio could be an issue. How to deal with existing high buy ratio in a typical large enterprise. Well, here again, it's interface and adaptability. So if you're going to buy something, then you need to make sure that you have an adapter to kind of tap into this buy. If you buy the whole solution, then that's not a problem. But buying means integration, and integration means adapters. So, and you could, again, this is of course, this sounds like a more expensive approach, because you have like, well, I need to build an adapter then, and this, I'm going to buy adapters then maybe. But thinking about a layer of stable interfaces built by adapters, which people can tap into and change their side with no penalty, is actually a very aggressive testing enablement. And to go into the digital space, the example that I often use is Amazon. Amazon basically said, look, we don't care what kind of systems people use to build their system. We have a business interface layer, and you have to you have to listen to these APIs. You have to talk through these APIs. And these APIs are our adapters, you could say. And if these APIs are honored, then you can do whatever you want. Some software is really crappy, and it's throwaway software that we're going to use for half a year because we quickly want to have a campaign, we want to quickly win a business. In other areas, you start to build more robust systems because it's a backend, it's transactions. But fundamentally, the system, the big system, the integrated system, doesn't care about the quality inside a module. And that is a beautiful way to think about large scaling up development by creating this compartmentation of your systems. I think ASML has been hugely successful because of the way that they have modularized their machine. That's their secret, as they have said in some of their books and publications. So this is an example of this aggressive testing. I want to be able to do aggressive testing. On the answer of how would you test human interaction on a digital twin, I need to think about that one. Well, it's a good question, actually. It's probably if you really want to have human interaction somewhere, you need to test aggressively with human interaction. I'm not sure if AI could be used as a human interaction replacement. You could try. You could say, well, give some. You could at least build a little model, like an AI model of a human interactor. I know that some trainers, colleagues of mine, have done that. They have their own version of ChatGPT that kind of responds like it was them. So they are doing this, but it's of course. So you could ease it up. So build a digital twin that does that human interaction like that, but it's not per se something that you can stick to. You also have to have your aggressive testing in real life, of course. I know that Harm put his hand up. I'm not sure if that's how that works. So Harm, if you can type your question anywhere, then please. If you wanted to say something like, hey, talk to me if you want to know more about this, then please. Also make that known in the chat. That's fine. Okay. Let's see. I'm getting another question in. Slice the features, modularizing. How to identify what is the right amount of slicing? Like a feature take 3 months, 6 months to build. Should be considered the time it takes to build a feature. It's a nice question. On the other hand, I always look at the scale of the total solution, and then if you think about this in a lean way, you want to create flow. So the reason that you slice is that you want to test and learn aggressive. So aggressive means faster rather than slower. So if I look at flow, if I'm going to build a system and it's going to take me 5 years, and to give you the example of the SpaceX thing, their modularization and their testing, they are going to repeat their testing cycle 40-50 times. So 50 times in a couple of years' time. So then that kind of gives you an idea for the amount of flow that you would want. If you're modularizing and you're slicing into features, and you're doing this for a program that says, well, this is going to be 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is, then I would kind of consider that learning points should be about a month. Sometimes you see hardware teams reverting to 3 weeks or 4 weeks or so. I could imagine this 4 weeks being a cycle for features, and then a feature could take something like that. I prefer, of course, having 2-week sprints or 2-week cycles, because you learn even faster and you also kind of put it more into the human perspective. But that's more of a human dynamic thing than a flow thing for the sake of the product and the product development. For product development, especially in hardware spaces, 4 weeks or a month would be a nice flow, and then a feature kind of coming at the end of that month to kind of say, well, this is ta-da, this is something. Of course, there's lead times, so you have to consider these a little bit. But building digital versions of your features first kind of could increase the cycle of decrease the cycle time again. So that would be something to look at. So looking at these time frames, that would be kind of sensible. If a feature takes 3 months, that's a big beast. That's a scary beast, because lots of people working on that for 3 months, so no feedback in the meantime. So I would ask these folks, if they're building a feature like that for aggressive testing, what is your digital version? What is your stupid test, your funny test, to kind of show some kind of proof of life for this in 3 months time? Because 3 months time, and then we say, oh, it doesn't work, then That's an expensive moment in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of energy, in terms of human dynamics, how people feel about it. I've worked on this for 3 months, it doesn't work. Now I'm actually married to it, I want to stick with it. So this is also something that I take into account. So I prefer shorters. 4 weeks would be my kind of maximum to use as a flow mechanism. So that means the right amount of slicing breaks things down into things that go, I want to learn something in a month, because that makes it faster, that makes it more aggressive. And the aggressive examples, like the SpaceX one, Formula One cars, the zipline, they kind of show that if you start to put your head around aggressive testing is everything, then you start to kind of change the modularization towards that. And slicing is just a technique that can help you to kind of consider and twist your head a bit to the other side. I've had multiple moments where people say, yeah, this is actually a far better way, but I'm a bit stuck with the master plan that I'm associated with. So I'm a bit now Braveheart torn apart by this idea, which is great. We can build something fast and learn fast. And the requirements that I have to fulfill for the master plan, which I have to be design is complete in the next 3 weeks. So I need to build all the requirements and specifications into my documents. So now I'm a bit stuck. So this is of course something which is why this model needs to kind of fit in at the higher product management and product development stages of systems engineering and roadmaps. Okay, so, and it's just a nice bridge to Luca asking his question. So what about planning and teams? Because maybe I can answer you a little bit on this. There's a couple of things here. So people in hardware development or teams in hardware development, they have far more specializations than any software environment that I've seen. So I've been in software development and these kinds of things for years, 10 years, 15 years or something. Started moving into hardware and I was struck. Like, okay, this is difficult because electrical engineering is a craft in which you may have like 25 or 30 specializations in a company. Now, of course, I can say software engineering, there's 20, 25 specializations, but in one company, not that much. It's typically front end, back end, a couple of systems, some data and databases and stuff. And there's actually some professions, but the amount of specialization that you see in hardware development is just not a step beyond that even. So that means that you have to think about, well, how do we set it up? And this is where I think Agile, and especially Agile at scale, is getting into the picture. So this whole story started years ago already with this whole idea of component teams and feature teams and component teams and feature teams and blah 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 blah. So I found this picture. Look, and I remember that one of the folks I trained with once, he said, look, if you want to have a fun Friday evening, well, you could argue, of course, but fun in his mind is to say, well, you just go to any Agile forum and just throw in the statement that component teams are better than feature teams, or the other way around. You don't mind, just randomly, and then just take a bit of popcorn, have a beer, and sit back and relax. So this was kind of my picture. And so we started in many of my own encounters as well. I made the mistake of trying to create multidisciplinary teams by force, saying, look, we need every. What you then get is a bit of a weird kind of system, right? You kind of have these Frankenstein teams of being allocated resources. That's one option. And the other option is that people are allocated full-time to a team. So then you don't have a Frankenstein team, you actually have a team. But then they say, yeah, but we miss this specialization, we miss this specialization, we miss this. So you get a lot of people running around your team that are needed by the team. So then you have a lot of dependencies. And I have learned the hard way, I must say, that I need to kind of think about this in a different way. And this is a bit Yoda, this is really a Yoda moment for me as well. I was really thinking about it, well, whoa, this is difficult. if you look at your hand, it actually has two grips. You have a power grip in which you can hold on to something. So if I hold this pen and say, I don't want you to take my pen, I'm going to hold it like this, and you cannot take it from my hand. Well, if you're extremely strong, I'm going to still be stronger, and this is what I always say to my son, but you won't be able to get it. This is my power grip. This, when I want to write, I'm not going to use my power grip. I could never write like this, right? If I try to write, it becomes really ugly. Well, in my case, it becomes really ugly when I write normally, but at least I feel more comfortable. And I can use a pen like this and really write and make elegant lines and all these kinds of things and try to be creative and draw pictures and be really precise and put some little dot on my camera right now. That would be possible. So this is the two hands I have. The same is for the thinking about teams. You need to structure, and at the same time you need to self-organize. This is your power grip and your precision grip. Basically you say, look, I'm going to get 100 people together that can reasonably, with that group of 100 or 150 or so, build together a bunch of features, a product, a component, a module, something cool, something they can be proud of, etc. How they organize internally, not so important. That is their job. This is why I want them to self-organize. I could help them self-organize by organizing some sessions and thinking about, okay, how do we organize the teams together? What could we do? And this is a question. So that is something that we could organize, but that is for you guys to figure it out. So with this, I wanted to kind of get to the end a little bit, because that is the most important thing in organizing teams. We have learned that organizing Agile release trains or tribes, that is where you structure and you're strict. No, these 150 people are going to be in there. The team setup of that system could be component teams, competence teams, feature teams doing it together. A group of 100 or 150 is typically tribal enough to feel proud together and to start flocking together and saying, hey, we're one team. In ASML, we had the metrology department, and they had t-shirts even with I love Metro. I think that's the kind of picture that kind of says we are in this together, but we have lots of different competence teams and technical teams and teams that people don't care about and everything. Yes? So this is something to kind of keep in mind. So that kind of puts me into the last end game thing. The thing that I have to kind of give to you as a kind of a few teasers for the end. Control risk with cost and master plan. No, interface to modules you must. Afraid of risk to its dark side it leads. Control progress with a plan and project managers. Integrate and test aggressive you must. The force will you learn faster. Control teams with resource allocation. Create a group of Jedi. We must self-organize. They can using the force. So with that thought, I'm going to be at the end so I can still answer a few questions. Of course, I want to kind of point out that our Agile hardware development for leading experts, the 20th of September, was a date that was chosen very cleverly, because it's actually the day before another interesting event that is taking place in the same area. So Munich is of course the pinnacle of the Oktoberfest, and in 24 it's from 21st September to 6th of October. So this is a wonderful moment to be in München, to have a great Agile for hardware development event, and then kind of move into the beer o'clock time with the 21st Oktoberfest. With that, I'm coming to the end. No, there's still rooms available, no problem. So I have a, let's see, okay, so I tried to answer Lucas' question, yes. What is your opinion about applying inverse Conway's Law's maneuver? Yeah, for me so for people who don't know this, Conway's Law basically says architecture follows organization. And so if you have a certain organizational setup of communications, then your architecture will resemble the communication patterns of your organization. In other words, if you set up a front-end team and a back-end team, well, this is a very simple example, guess what type of system you will end up with. So the other way of thinking about this, if you say, I have an architecture that I want to have certain modularity, like what Marcel is implying, and you basically say, I could organize the teams to kind of follow the pattern and say, well, then I want teams to be able to build a module. So yes, you can do this. Make sure that you kind of share this with the teams and make them also part of this equation, because if you kind of put it on them and say, well, this is it, it's going to be tough. I've worked actually on microservices a while, and it's the same idea. Microservices is not a technical thing in software; it's an organizational thing. Organizing teams around services means that these teams build services, which means you get a service landscape. So this is the inverse Conway's laws. It's a wonderful way to make change, but the fundamentals of hardware development, I think, is that the group, in a group of 150, they need to start taking ownership of how to organize, and your architecture needs to be part of that picture, yes. So I hope I answered your question or your comment, Marcel, as well. With that, we've come to the last minute. Yes, thank you, Edgar. Another Agile event directly following your event. Yes, the Oktoberfest is really an Agile event, right? So you become really Agile when you go there, absolutely. But it's also a power grip, where you have to kind of hold your power grip to 6 of these big glasses of beer at the same time. With this, I leave you to join us hopefully at the Agile event at Munich. I hope that you will have enjoyed this as much as I have. It's always a bit tight and difficult and scary to talk into an abyss of people that are listening and you can't see their faces or anything. So hope you've enjoyed and learned something. I will share, of course, the slides to make sure that you also get that, and the recording will be there as well. And if any one of you wants to reach out, just send me an email. I can see this here. I will just put it into the everyone. My email address, I haven't put it in there, so I'm going to use berg.com. This is my email, or the one with Gladwell. That's maybe even academy.com. Here's the 2 email addresses that you can use to reach out to me to say, hey, I want to have some more on this, or I'm interested in the event, but I still wonder if it's worth it for me. Please reach out. I always want to learn more. I'm working with Skilled Agile Institute on hardware development and their courses as well. So, maybe we'll see each other in the future. I hope so. And then maybe it's live with a beer. Have a great day. Thank you for the thank yous.